What is up, my dashing dudes and darling dames? I am the Hans TV, and I would just like to welcome you back to your weekly dose of idiocy. It's r/StoriesAboutKevin. Our first post for today comes from the great Key Rise, Kevin the Edgelord. When I was a sophomore in high school, there was a guy who joined our friend group that was a Kevin in his own way. Unlike the rest of us, he was a junior. I had known him previously from running cross country with him and was already not a fan. I told the other people in our group, but they decided to let him in anyway. Oh well. Here are some stories about him. He claimed that he had 8 girlfriends. At one point, he changed this number to 14. When asked about it, he was unable to show any pictures of him with said girlfriends, or provide any of their full names. One night, some of my friends had a sleepover. I couldn't make it for some reason I don't remember. Apparently, during the night, 2 of my friends began a discussion of whether or not a sword or a spear is a better weapon. They both concluded the sword. Kevin overheard and started arguing that the rope dart is better than both. Apparently, my other friends kept on trying to change the subject after a certain point, but he continuously brought the subject back and argued it for 3 hours. One of his main points was that the rope dart offers 720 degrees of defense. One time, in our group chat, I mentioned I had just worked out at a gym. For some reason, I knew Kevin was going to make it about himself. He began to calculate what his max bench was and told us it was 180. Kevin was about 5'3" and maybe 120 pounds. We had a chat that was everyone but him that was designed for complaining about things he did. We immediately started discussing what he said and concluded he was full of crap. The next day at school, we found Kevin's workout partner who told us he never did more than the bar with 25s on each side. Kevin was in an ethics class I was in and sat next to me. One time he claimed that adoption is always a bad choice that leaves problems for the adopted child. A girl in our class that was adopted immediately shut him down, saying it never caused her any problems. One of my other friends went to get fast food in a drive-thru with Kevin one time. Kevin paid at the first window but drove past the second where you get the food. My friend told him about it and he awkwardly started laughing, then backed up. Kevin was also an edgelord. One time I overheard people outside of our friend group talking about him saying that he yelled at a bunch of people in the cafeteria for being simple-minded. I texted Kevin and asked about this. He admitted it and said he did it because he hates normal people. There was really only one person in our friend group that consistently defended Kevin. One time after an argument through chat, Kevin texted him repeatedly saying he was going to off himself. The next day, he revealed that he wasn't. Kevin was an anarchist. He never really explained why he thought anarchy was a good idea. He also told us he had 8 different disabilities and was self-diagnosed with schizophrenia. Our junior year, Kevin's senior year, we stopped hanging out with him as much, partly because the guy that defended him moved away. Kevin still ended up being in the same pre-calculus class as me. On the first day of class when we were introducing ourselves, Kevin described himself as a realist. I'm not really sure if I agree with that. I love that he said that he hated people for being simple-minded when he himself is the simple-minded one. Our next post comes from Exterminate069, Kevindiana Jones in the Temple of Shroom. A few years ago, I hired someone to come fix a collapsed floor and other damage in my house. The guy that came out to work on repairs was the used car salesman type, very aggressively friendly. More importantly, he was a super Kevin. I had hired him for a job he said would take 3 days and it took 8, because I fired him on day 5. On the first day, he showed up 4 hours late and obviously inebriated. He started digging in the backyard and I asked him what he was up to. He told me he had his repair tools in his hands, then the ground beast took his tools and buried them. At this point, I start to question my own reality and then his. Is this guy on LSD, PCP, extreme hallucinogens? He actually did dig up his tools. No idea how they got there, but I would guess he was drunk and decided to bury them for fun. The next day, he had spent over 2 days hired a grand total of 2 hours actually fishing stuff. Instead, he was always out at lunch for most of the day. By day 3, I demanded he stay at my house and not take paid lunch breaks. I went to work that day and came home to find a disaster. There was oil spilled all over the kitchen and dirty pans everywhere. That's right, the motherfucker was using my kitchen to cook. I found him, much to my surprise, actually in the other room fixing the floor, albeit with a greasy sandwich in his hands. I asked if he had it delivered. To my horror, he actually replied, "Nope, I just casually took it out of the bin." I sprinted to the kitchen to find he'd used at least $50 worth of my food, cooked and eaten it, including 10 boxes of fresh mushrooms. The next day, I gave him a good piece of my mind before going to work again. I came home to find my backyard torn up because he buried his tools again. On the 5th and final day, I found Kevin's true purpose. He was not even a real repairman. That's why he was trying to board up the floors with duct tape. When I walked in the door on the 5th night, he was sitting on my bed with muddy shoes, smoking a button mushroom. That's right. Kevin was on my bed with a match, burning the cap of a food mushroom and snorting the mushroom dust. With a crap-eating grin, Kevin looked up and said, "Want to smoke?" Before cops hauled him away, I hope they explained to him only some mushrooms are hallucinogenic. Honestly, I would have fired this guy after the first day whenever he destroyed your backyard looking for tools that he buried because he was so high. Come on. Our next post comes from Zelda Spell Factory, and Jesus Christ, they post a lot. Father-in-law wants to paint the house. Years ago, my father-in-law needed to paint his house. Father-in-law has no ability to do household projects, mostly because he has no common sense. When hubby was in high school, he helped his dad put up Christmas lights on their house. Hubby was up on the ladder and father-in-law was on the ground. At one point, father-in-law tells hubby to hang onto the roof. Hubby turned to ask him what he said, and father-in-law yanked the ladder right out from under him. This is how bad father-in-law is with common sense and household projects. So when the house needed new paint, father-in-law called and asked hubby to help him paint. I went with hubby just in case they needed another set of hands. Father-in-law, stepmother-in-law owned a 2-story house at the time. I asked how he planned to reach the 2nd story to paint it, mostly because I didn't see a big ladder in any other way to reach up that high. Then my father-in-law told us his plan. He was going to pull his van right up next to the house. Then he was going to put a piece of plywood on the roof, on top of the luggage rack. He was going to put a ladder on top of that, and then he or hubby could climb up and paint. Father-in-law said that the best part was that the person on the ladder wouldn't even need to come down when they needed to move to another part of the house to paint it. The van could just be driven to the new spot with the person up on the ladder. This was the first that stepmother-in-law had heard of this plan. While hubby and I were still in shock over the stupidity of father-in-law's plan, my stepmother-in-law asked father-in-law if it would be more expensive to pay a professional to paint the house or to pay a doctor to fix the broken bones that were going to happen with his pan to paint the house. Father-in-law was honestly shocked that we didn't see the brilliance of his plan. Well, I hope that y'all actually hired a painting company, because they would have the tools and the know-how to do this instead of, "Yeah, let's just put a ladder on top of a van and then I can drive it so that you don't have to move the ladder." Yeah, that's not how that works. Our final post for today is a cross post from Stupid People Stories, and it's by Anya4, accused of selling the coronavirus. I was working in the general store of a large resort at the busiest register in the store. Needless to say, the line got long and I was moving rather quickly to help the guests waiting at my register. As I am waiting for my current guests to finish their credit card payment, I glance at the line to see how long it is. I notice a couple of gentlemen who look to be in their 60s who look to be unhappy. I figured that they are tired of waiting and let the guests in my line know that they are more twisted up front if they don't wish to wait. A few more guests later, I come to the gentlemen who look unhappy. The first man sets down some beer he wants to purchase, and as per our state law, ID him. He pays and I bag his purchase. Now it is his friend's turn. He sets his purchase down and I ask for his ID, which he does not want to show me. I explain that I can't sell him his beer without it. He then proceeds to get very agitated with me. Not because I won't sell him the beer, but because we have the audacity to be selling in our store such a dangerous and deadly virus. Yep, you guessed it. The beer he had was Corona. I tried my best to make him understand that it was a brand of beer and had nothing to do with the virus. But the more I tried, the madder he became. Finally, his equally upset friend convinced him to leave. Needless to say, one of the strangest interactions I've had in my 47 years of customer service. Thankfully, the other guests in line were not only patient, but I was told time and time again how well I had handled it, and how they couldn't wait to share this amusing story. So I did some research. Corona beer came out in 1925, and you said this person had to be in about his 60s? So that means that just between the time that he was born and the time that Corona beer had come out, there had been almost 30 years that Corona had been out. How? How do you not know this? Well, all right, my dashing dudes and darling dames, that is going to do it for today's episode of r/stories about Kevin. I hope you liked the stories, and if you did, I'm going to link them in the description as always. And if you liked the video, subscribe, share, drop a like, and a comment down below with what you'd like to see me read next. A humongous thank you to everyone who keeps on subscribing. I cannot fathom or thank you enough for what y'all do for this channel and what y'all do for this community. But with that being said, I will see you in the next video.